So I just saw the trailer for Revolution, a show where electricity stops and America falls into small encampments where agriculture has to grow and where people will grow plants out of old car engines and phones, cell phones, telephones, none of it works. And it breaks down to a bunch of people playing with swords and the government falling. And I don't feel like this would exactly happen. I'm excited. I want to see the show, and of course I don't know exactly their whole reasoning and backdrop for it because the show hasn't come out yet. Which I'm very curious to see how they say that all these things happen. I hope my head is still in frame. But I don't think that we would fall directly into a sort of commune thing. I think the society without electricity that we have here would still exist relatively the same to how we have it. I say this because a lot of the older technology and older ways of getting information around still exists and is still around. There are still prints. People don't use print presses as often, but not all the tools we use to communicate depend on electricity. Like, a lot do, and certainly in every category there exists things that use electricity. If I don't think we lost electricity, we would lose everything. Like, we would still have... Everything would become less efficient, though. Everything would be slower, like it used to be, and we definitely wouldn't be able to keep in touch as well as we do or could. See, the trade-off with this is... someone would be, like, sending a letter home to their parents, and that would be pretty much the same for me when I only talk to my family once or twice a week. I could still do that in a letter. I would just have to get around to sitting around and doing that and making it happen. Big businesses and big corporations existed before electricity, so we wouldn't fall way back to the point of being small communes and small villages doing together. You know, because our systems are more than just electrical. Like, electricity is in everything, but it isn't the key component. So, I think that we would, first of all, we would not make cars. Wouldn't go right back to horses, because we still have the bicycle. And the bicycle is the most efficient way of travel. I think we'd see more of a rise in bicycles. And then the problem comes in manufacturing, which... For manufacturing, it would take a couple steps back without electricity and without the sophisticated tools, so it becomes slower, but then that just goes more to more demanding time on people. And because we still have systems like the assembly line, we still have newspapers to communicate, I think there would be a lot more magazines and publications that come out in lieu of all the people that have found blogging and putting stuff on the internet. So I think there would just be more of that, and there would be more cheaper of that. The resilient minds that, for whatever reason, I don't know why electricity is failing, because it is literally the trading of electrons and using of that to where just like a property of electrons stopped working somehow. I think Revolution will not be a science fiction movie. Like, there's little doodad that goes, but it strikes me as magic. Because science fiction takes rules and it takes concepts that people know in science, and then it takes that and says, what if it could do a lot more? And then so you get things like time travel, and you get things like androids, and you get things like rocket cars and flying cars. All that exists are feasible technologies that could happen. But in Revolution, electricity stops, which, unless there is some principle of physics that I don't know about, where electrons all of a sudden stop being electrons, or stop reacting to each other inside of fields, then I don't see how technology would stop altogether because electricity would stop. That would be a whole force of nature that stopped. Like, there would be a static electricity, there wouldn't be lightning. So, Revolution will be a fantasy show. Let's just put this out there, fantasy. And a lot of people that kind of make me angry say that fantasy has to have unicorns and dragons and knights, when that's not fantasy. You can have a fantasy show set in a science fiction setting. Like, if you take a future future planet where there are spaceships, and then you add magic in there, that makes it a fantasy. So, like games like Warhammer 40k that have robots and then also have magic and psychics and stuff, that is not a science fiction game. That is still a fantasy game, even though it takes place in the future. So the difference between science fiction and fantasy is magic and scientific concepts. And I'm so angry at the people who say that because something is in the future and because something has robots is a science fiction thing and is not fantasy because it doesn't have a freaking dragon. Magic, fantasy, science fiction. And there can be stuff in between, but if there's any magic in it, that makes it fantasy. Unless you have a scientific explanation for it. I don't know how this turned into a rant. I'm gonna walk around outside now.